Our discussion on classes and objects is not complete without talking about member functions. By definition, classes are defined as entities that encapsulate data, which is member variables as we have discussed, and operations that are performed on the data that they encapsulate. These operations are known as member functions. So, a member function is a function that is defined inside a class. Within a member function, we can access member variables of that class. So the member variables of the class, you can access them from a member function. We have seen examples of this, and we have actually used this throughout this course. Consider the function, consider the variable string. So we have already talked about strings and how they are not a primitive variable such as ints or doubles or floats. Strings are actually objects. So if you have string s, ENGG, recall that you can get the length of a string by using the length member function. So we call the member function. Now you know that it's a member function. If you go s.length, the length of the string is now stored in A. So dot length is actually a member function for class string, and of course S is an object of type string, and you can access the so from an object you can access these member functions using the dot operator. This is called the dot operator. You can access member functions by using the dot operator from the object. Another member function was the char at. So you recall that you can say print s dot char at, let's just say at 0, and this would print e. So char at is another member function, and notice that you have the object s and you're accessing the member function using the dot operator. So let's write our own member functions and see how they work. Let's go to processing. So consider class rectangle, where it has L and W, length and width, and we have the constructor that is taking two integers, and we have defined an object R1. Let's declare another object as well. Let's define another object. Let's call this R2, and let's pass, let's say 4 and 2 to this object. So we have two objects created now on memory. And in order to write our member function, we're going to define our member function inside our class. So it would look like any other function really. Area, and I'm not going to pass anything to it. Guess what? Because it does have access to L and W. So I can say return L times W. Well, you're thinking that we are not passing L and W to this function, so how can we access it? Well, you can access it because a member function can access, so a member function can access the member variables of the class. And that's why you're able to access L and W. Let's consider using this function now. So if I come here and if I say int capital A, and I say I will calculate the area of object R1, I would simply say R1 dot area. And now the area of rectangle is saved in A. So if I say print ln A, I'm going to get the value 50. 5 times 10 is 50. I can do the same thing for R2. So if I come here and I just say print ln R2 dot area, notice that I'm not passing anything to area. Area just knows that it is dealing with the data within R2. So now I'm going to get area as 8, which is 2 times 4. So there is a big distinction between member functions and functions in, or external functions, or functions that we have been using. So this is a member function. Let's do an example with a normal function. So if I had another, so if I have a function area here, so if I have an external function, if I just go ahead and say int let's just say my area, this is outside of the class, you see. So here, if I go ahead in here and I say, well, return L times W, this is going to give me an error because it doesn't know what L and W is, because this is, I'll write it here, this is an external function, so it does not have access to L and W. This is an external function and doesn't have access to data members of any class. So what do I do if I want to use this? Well, I could say pass me an object of type rectangle and I can calculate the area for you. So I could say to this function rectangle, let's call it A, and if I pass this, then here I can say return A dot L times A dot W, like that. Now this works. Let's see how they're different in using them. So let's look at what we did for R1. So for R1, in order for me to call the member function, calling the member function area, and I'm printing A. Well, if I wanted to call my area function, then I would have to do this. My area, and I would have to pass it an object, because area has access to the content of R1. My area does not have access to the content of R1. So I would have to actually pass it R1 because it is taking an object. So then this works. So now if I output A2, I should get 50-50. So I am, this is a, so calling the member function area here, calling the external function my area. And that's the difference between a member function and an external function. So let's do another example. Consider the following class employee. We have string name and float annual salary, and we have a constructor that initializes and constructs the object. What if we wanted to write a member function that calculates monthly salary? So we have the data, we need to create operations that to perform on that data, operations that would be useful. So let's say I'll say float monthly salary, sal, and I am going to, in this member function, we're simply going to return the monthly salary of this employee, which is simply annual salary divided by 12. So then in the setup function, if I wanted to call this member function, I would simply say emp, which is the object, dot, using the dot operator, I can access it. I can access the member function monthly sal, and I don't need to pass anything to this function. Why? Because it has access to the data within emp. It has access to this. So if let's just print the output. And let's see what's printed. So the monthly salary of the employee is printed. Let's do another one. Let's write a function that calculates the net income of the employee. So float net income. And this time we're going to pass the desired tax rate because it's not part of the class. So the tax rate, and we can pass a different tax rate each time. And to calculate the net income, it would be, so let's say float net, that's going to be annual salary times 1 minus rate, or I called it tax rate. And then we simply need to return net. Okay, so if we wanted to call this function, then let's just create a float here, float, let's call it net sal. And in order to call this, we need to go emp dot net income. Now you notice here that I can't just leave it like this. This is expecting a variable to be sent. So let's just say 0.2 as in 20%, and we would run it. Oh, I didn't print the results here, so let's print net sal, and we would get $56,000, which is 80% of 70,000. So we know that our response is correct. So the important thing is that member functions are declared inside the class. They have access to member variables, and they can be overloaded just like any other function.